Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm doing an initial thoughts review of the first 2 volumes of the Yuri manga series How Do We Relationship by Tamifull, originally serialized in Shogakukan's Manga One and Ura Sunday web platforms since August 2018. I'm reading an English edition that is being published by Viz Media from 2019 to the present. This manga is rated older teen. And to start off this discussion, I should probably admit that besides these 2 volumes, the only other Yuri title I've read is Whispered Words, back in 2015. Since then, I've certainly had more than a little interest in reading more Yuri, but the stars of a series sounding interesting, having a good reputation, and being currently available at my library did not at least seem to be aligning. Until now. And if my increased exposure to quality queer manga content is any indication, this will likely be only the first of many interesting series to come. Content notes for homophobia, navigating living in and out of the closet, pressure to have sex, nudity, and sex. Keywords that came to mind reading these 2 books: relationship of convenience, learning to relationship, breaking out of the mold, coming of age, school clubs, and band. The synopsis for Volume 1 is, quote, shy Miwa has always dreamed of finding love, but living in small-town Japan made finding the right match difficult, especially since she likes girls. Even going away to college didn't seem to help, until one day her outgoing classmate, Saeko, suggests they might as well start dating each other, since it's not like either of them has other options. At first, it seems like things won't work out as their personalities clash and misunderstandings abound, but when their casual friendship starts to become something more, Miwa begins to wonder, can a pragmatic proposal lead to true love? ? End quote. Although I feel like that's more of an introduction to what is about to happen than what happened in the first volume itself. I'm generally a bigger fan of stories about relationships rather than focusing on the lead up to a relationship. That said, I was a bit surprised by how little lead up there was to Miwa and Saeko deciding to date. It wasn't bad, just surprisingly fast paced. As far as the art went, I liked it. Pretty standard at first glance. The one thing that really struck me as I read through was the framing during sex. While I'm still going to try and generally avoid showing it on the YouTube, Tamifull manages pretty deftly, in my humble opinion, to avoid the stereotypes of what is generally called the male gaze. Between having sex, talking about sex, and thinking about sex, a decent amount of these volumes is centered around not only sexuality, but the act of sex itself. Visually, in each frame, we are in a less is more situation, which particularly struck me in the half-page frame of Saeko going down on Miwa, which was graphic but minimalistic at the same time. The writing was also good and struck an interesting balance between being fun and taking the premise/reality seriously without being a PSA. When it came to the sexuality representation, it felt like this is where I am the weakest as far as being able to compare it to other things. That said, reading through other people's reviews, it seems like that Tamifull's depiction of lesbians actually in relationship and actually having sex is a breath of fresh air. Obviously a deliberate choice. The sex does begin on page 1. But being a lesbian is more than just about the sexual act itself, and it is incredibly interesting to see how these 2 very different people navigate their rather homophobic culture. As a queer person who grew up in the Bible Belt, I could relate. The communities Miwa and Saeko find themselves in are peopled by a pretty wide diversity of views, although I did appreciate that both of our main characters seem to have a strong sense of themselves and their sexuality. Between volumes 1 and 2, I felt like the level of tension between the most antagonistic characters and our main couple increased. So I am wondering if that will continue throughout the series. There are a number of conversations about who the couple feels comfortable being out to and trying to be on the DL in public, although things rarely seem to go as planned. I should also note that there is at least one comment that comes up in Volume 2 that involves equating one's womanhood to one's genitals. I would be interested in how this landed with y'all. At this point, based off of the general ignorance of our side characters and the learning curve our protagonists are on, I do not immediately see this statement as necessarily something endorsed by the book itself. That might or might not change as I read further. Either way, it might be something you are not interested in reading at this moment, so I wanted to bring it up. Speaking of learning curves, perhaps unsurprisingly for a series entitled How Do We Relationship?, Miwa and Saeko don't have much experience with relationships and have a lot to learn. Volume 2 spent some time with our characters trying to navigate issues of jealousy. The more notable point of friction for me was how much or how little the two have sex. Miwa is at least starting out from a place where she is less comfortable or less interested in sex than Saeko. So there were parts where it felt like Saeko is pressuring Miwa to have sex, but Saeko is also actively trying to not do that, and Miwa is trying to figure out what she really wants. So I suspect we will see character growth in this area. This is one of those things that many people do have to learn in their early relationships, and felt like a realistic point of conflict for a relationship of convenience. Race, class, and ability/disability are underdeveloped facets of this series so far. When it came to star ratings, I also felt more than a little lost with very little to compare to. I also just did the calculations for my fourth quarter stats, and apparently my average rating for not comics of late has been 4 out of 5. So I was wondering if I was being too positive. So I've ended up rating Volume 1 4 out of 5 stars and Volume 2 3 out of 5 stars. This drop is pretty usual for me when it comes to series. I also don't connect super easily with plot lines about bands and music, which did dominate Volume 2, but I am very interested in proceeding. How about you? Bye all, keep reading and organize to end capitalist oppression. And Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, an Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.